Imagine this. Your son leaves home tomorrow morning. He kisses you goodbye. He walks down the road. He disappears past the tree line. And that's it. No phone, no text, no email, no way to check in. Weeks pass, then months, then a full year. You don't know if he's cold. You don't know if he's hungry. You don't know if he's even breathing. He could be laughing with strangers 300 miles away, or he could already be dead, buried in a place you will never find, under a name no one bothered to remember. And you would have no way of knowing which one was true, not for weeks, not for months, sometimes not ever. This wasn't a nightmare. This wasn't a rare tragedy. For most of human history, this was simply what love looked like. So here's the question that should terrify you a little. If you couldn't call, text, or check a screen, how would you know if the person you loved most in the world was still alive? Right now, in your pocket, you are carrying something extraordinary. A small glass rectangle that can tell you in less than 1 second whether your mother answered her phone this morning, whether your best friend made it home safely, whether the soldier your family is worried about just posted a photo 3 hours ago. You don't think about this power. You use it 100 times a day without noticing. But strip it away, just for a moment, and something strange happens. You start to realize that knowing was never guaranteed. It was never automatic. It was earned, fought for, sometimes never achieved at all. For 300,000 years of human existence, if someone you loved walked over the horizon, they simply vanished. Not metaphorically, literally. The moment they left your line of sight, they left your reality. You didn't get updates, you got silence. And silence is a strange thing to live inside of, because silence doesn't mean everything is fine. Silence doesn't mean everything is wrong either. Silence means nothing, and nothing is the hardest thing a human mind can sit with. Here's what most people assume when they think about the old days. They assume news simply traveled slower. A letter instead of a text. A few days delay instead of instant delivery. That's not what happened. That's not even close to what happened. Because a letter requires 3 things most people never think about. First, someone has to be able to write it. For most of history, writing wasn't universal. It was rare. In many villages, across many centuries, not a single person could read or write. Your son could be alive and desperate to tell you, and still have no way to put that truth into a form you could receive. Second, even if the letter gets written, someone has to carry it, not electronically, physically, on foot, on horseback, by ship, through forests, over mountains, across borders controlled by people who might rob, kill, or simply ignore the traveler carrying your words. Third, and this is the part that breaks people when they realize it, even if the letter is written, and even if it's carried, there is no guarantee it ever arrives. No delivery confirmation, no read receipt, no error message telling you it failed. If the letter never comes, you don't know why. Maybe the messenger died. Maybe the messenger got lost. Maybe the messenger simply decided not to bother. Maybe your son never wrote it at all because he was already gone. You have no way to tell the difference between the message didn't arrive and the person didn't survive. Silence could mean anything, and your mind, desperate for an answer, fills that silence with the worst possible story. Now picture this. It's the 1800s. Your husband has left for a whaling voyage, not a weekend trip, not a business conference. A whaling voyage could last 2 years, 3 years, sometimes longer. For the entire time he is gone, you receive no updates, none. The ship doesn't call ahead. There's no portmaster radioing news back to the mainland. You simply wait. You go to sleep every night not knowing if your husband is alive on the other side of the planet, or if he drowned 6 months ago in a storm no one back home has heard about yet. And here's the detail that most people never consider. Even the ship's crew didn't always know. If a man fell overboard in a storm in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from land, there was often no way to tell his family quickly. The ship had to complete its voyage. Sometimes that took another full year. So somewhere, a wife is setting a table for 2. A mother is praying for her son's safe return. A child is asking, when is Papa coming home? And the answer they don't know yet is that he already isn't. He died 11 months ago. The news just hasn't caught up to the grief. Think about that for a second. Grief used to have a delay. You could keep loving someone in the present tense, long after they had already become a memory. If peacetime uncertainty was hard, war made it unbearable. During the First World War, families in small towns across Europe and America lived through something almost impossible to imagine today. Months of total blackout regarding their own sons, husbands, and brothers. A young man would leave for the front, and then nothing. No letters for weeks at a time because mail had to pass through military sensors, then travel by train, then by ship, then by more trains, dodging blocked routes, damaged rail lines, and battlefield chaos. Families didn't get updates, they got waves. A letter would arrive, dated 6 weeks earlier, written when he was alive, but that letter told you nothing about right now. He could have been killed the very next morning after writing it. So people developed a horrifying skill, reading old letters as if they were current information, while knowing somewhere in the back of their minds that the person who wrote those words might already be gone. And then one day a telegram would arrive, not from him, from the government. In many towns, everyone knew what an unscheduled telegram meant before it was even opened. Neighbors would see the delivery boy walking toward a house and instinctively go quiet. Some families, seeing him approach, would stand frozen on their porch, praying he'd walk past. Because in that era, not knowing was often safer than finding out. At least in silence, hope could still survive. So how did people survive this? How did entire civilizations function while carrying this kind of uncertainty for years at a time? The answer isn't one invention. It's a series of increasingly desperate and increasingly brilliant human workarounds. Thousands of years ago, watchtowers were built along coastlines and mountain ranges specifically to answer one brutal question: is the enemy coming, or is my family safe? A single fire lit on a hilltop could be seen from the next hill. That hill would light its own fire. Within hours, a message that would have taken days to carry by foot could travel across an entire kingdom. This wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. But it planted an idea that would echo through every century that followed. If you can't send a person, send a signal. Ancient empires, and from Persia to Rome to the Inca, built entire systems of professional runners stationed every few miles, who would sprint a message to the next runner, who would sprint it to the next. The Inca system, the chasqui, could relay a message nearly 250 miles in a single day. Through mountain terrain most modern hikers would need a week to cross. This is important because it reveals something about human nature. The drive to know is so powerful, entire empires built infrastructure, roads, relay stations, trained runners, for the sole purpose of collapsing distance. By the 1600s and 1700s, people realized single letters were too fragile, too easy to lose. So they started sending duplicates. The same letter, written twice, sent on 2 different ships, hoping at least one would survive the journey. Some letters even included instructions. If this reaches you before the other, disregard the version dated earlier. People were essentially building a redundancy system by hand with ink and paper, centuries before engineers would use the same concept to build the internet. And in smaller towns and villages, people didn't rely only on official mail, they built human networks. A traveling trader might carry word from town to town. A returning sailor might know which other family's sons were still alive on his ship. A church congregation might pray aloud, by name, for someone specific, partly for comfort, but partly because saying a name aloud was itself a way of keeping that person tethered to the world of the living. Communities didn't just wait individually, they waited together. And shared waiting was, in its own way, a technology, a social system built to distribute the unbearable weight of not knowing. Here's the part almost no one talks about. This uncertainty didn't just create logistical problems, it rewired how people related to love itself. If you know deep down that any goodbye could be a final goodbye, with no way to confirm it for months or years, you start treating every moment differently. Historians studying letters from this era found something remarkable. Many of these letters written by ordinary people, farmers, soldiers, sailors, and their spouses, carried an intensity that modern casual texting rarely does. Because when a letter might be the last thing you ever say to someone, you don't waste it on small talk. People said, "I love you," like they meant it, because it might be the final proof that they ever did. They wrote detailed accounts of daily life, not because it was interesting, but because if this letter was the last piece